This is now the third episode in MLP that is building up towards the Equestrian Games. And though it may not be the main storyline of Season 4, I do like to see that there are multiple overarching plot lines that are being added onto. Of course, many of us would have guessed that Rainbow Dash would be competing at some point during these games, and it's certainly good to see her desire to be the best being the driving force for the conflict. But just how well does this story hold up? As the episode begins, we are introduced to Bulk Biceps? I know that I've heard the name Bulk Biceps from the fandom before, but I've always been calling him Snowflake. I guess I can get used to calling him Bulk, eventually. It also seems that just like many other episodes this season, the writers are trying to involve all of the main 6. But although it seemed rather pointless to have all of them in Daring Don't, at least in this episode they are all serving a purpose. Even if their presence isn't essential to the story, they were needed in order to resolve the conflict that Rainbow was going through later on. So I can appreciate seeing an episode that actually gives a little purpose to having all the main 6 involved, even if it wasn't all that much.
Yeah!
Too much?
Right from the start, though, we get the sense that Rainbow Dash is more concerned about herself qualifying for the Equestrian Games, at least more so than the Ponyville team. But I can remember thinking, if Rainbow does want to win, surely there are other Pegasi in Ponyville who would be better suited for a relay. But in the next scene, they actually do give a good reason as to why the other Pegasi aren't part of the team. So I am glad that they touched on this little hole in the plot, because otherwise I would have been scratching my head for the rest of the episode. Of course, Rainbow believes that she'll be able to pick up the slack, no matter who is working with her, once again showing that she has some boundless confidence. We get an interesting new location, which I assume is called Rainbow Falls given the title of the episode. High in the mountains, and almost looks like a ski resort. In fact, both the location and the look of the town kind of reminds me of Park City, Utah. Especially since the Equestrian Games are based off the Olympic Games and Utah was the home of the 2002 Winter Olympics. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I can see the writers using that as the inspiration for this town. Plus, we get to see griffins. I know that they are off in the background and don't get any speaking roles, but I'm glad that we finally get to see more griffins. I hope that we'll be getting more appearances from them in the future episodes because there is still a lot of potential with building up the culture of a non-pony race in MLP. Okay, let's talk for a moment about Bulk as a character. He never had this much trouble flying before, and he was even accepted into the Wonderbolt Academy. He's always been in the background before and never got anything more than a "yeah" for his lines. So I would say that because the writers are trying to establish him as more of a character instead of just a gag, I can accept this new aspect about him. In fact, now that they have established him as a rather weak flyer, I wonder if that makes him related to Scootaloo in any way. It could happen. So, Soren ends up getting injured, which I could totally see coming. The way this episode is set up easily points to Rainbow getting a chance to be on an expert flying team rather than the one from Ponyville. And it does set up a good conflict, albeit one that we have seen in many other TV shows and movies before, although in this case the fact that Spitfire knows Rainbow Dash and what she is capable of beforehand makes it a little more believable as to why Spitfire would want to have Rainbow on their team. However, this is where I start taking issue with the episode. They're making Spitfire out to be less of a character than before. In Wonderbolt Academy, I could actually respect the choices that she made and why she made them. Here, it seems like her personality has been pulled back a few steps just to suit the conflict, especially when we find out later on that Soren really was able to take part in the relay and that Spitfire had lied to him in order to give Rainbow a chance to be on the team. This does not seem like the respectable military commander she used to be. I know that her behavior was kind of essential for the conflict, but it causes the audience to lose a lot of respect for her character in the process. Not the best choice, I'd say. I would say that the conflict presented here is a good one, but it is also overwhelmingly predictable. Twilight starts talking about how the rest of the main 6's efforts will all have been for naught. But I will give the episode credit when Twilight doesn't actually say what the right choice is, even after Rainbow asks her. This is a decision that Rainbow will have to make all on her own. So it is good to see that Rainbow was learning the lesson instead of having it blatantly pointed out to her. I'm also glad to see that Rainbow decided that she doesn't want to disappoint anyone before making her final choice. It would have reflected rather badly on her character if she tried to convince herself to join the Cloudsdale team and leave the Ponyville team on their own. To be honest, I knew that Derpy was going to walk through that door right when Fluttershy said that they found a replacement. So, let's talk about Derpy for a little bit. I am especially glad to see her being back in the show, and even being front and center for a few seconds. They didn't give her a speaking role and they didn't call her by name, but I actually think that this is a better way to handle her appearance in the show. They didn't have anyone getting impatient with Derpy over her klutzy nature, and I think that having little appearances like this will allow her to be more included in the future. I'm not expecting her to get another speaking role for a very long time, but for now it is fun to see her actually taking part again, and the general audience will start enjoying her presence as well. And there's another rainbow signifying another key. It's official that this is how all the keys are going to be making their appearances now. And while I'm at it, I predict that we'll be seeing Pinky's key next during Pinky Pride, since that episode is supposed to be all about her element. Okay, so what do I think about this story overall? I would say that the plot is very standard, quite similar to a lot of stories that we've seen before. They managed to up the entertainment value by putting in a lot of characters that we haven't seen getting the spotlight. Bulk Biceps is now being established as more of a character, which I say could have potential, but he seems to be playing the part of a less than ideal male role model that is being played up for laughs. Even Soren gets more of a speaking role here, but has to go through getting injured and then neglected by his own teammates, making him seem a little pitiful. And Spitfire especially seems less likable here, particularly with her lying to Soren just to entice Rainbow to join their team. It is really fun to see Derpy making more of an appearance, but honestly, all these extra characters being thrown in feels a lot like padding. When you get right down to it, the story still feels overwhelmingly predictable, and even at times rather simple. They did add a few little twists to what we expect here and there, but the plot wasn't all that engaging for me. With that said, however, I did enjoy watching all the padding they put in to fill out the time. You just have to accept that you're not going to get a really inspiring story here. In fact, the way that Rainbow Dash showed her loyalty in Wonderbolt Academy was done far better in my opinion, and they didn't have to make Spitfire into a less likable character in order to have the episode work. But if you can put aside a less stellar story and just enjoy the bits of comedy they put in to pad the episode, then it becomes much more enjoyable, because there are a lot of laughs here. And while the story isn't all that impressive, it did feel well constructed. I wasn't scratching my head throughout the whole episode from any potential plot holes. I did have a lot of fun watching Rainbow Falls, but I'm probably not going to call it one of the greats that MLP has to offer. In the meantime, though, I would like to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the changes they've made to Bulk Biceps? Do you think they intend to continue adding on to his character? What are your thoughts on Spitfire here? Do you think her actions fit with her character? Did you enjoy seeing Derpy making another appearance? Do you think that she was handled any better or worse than she was in the last roundup? Do you have any new thoughts on these keys now that we know that they are supposed to represent an element of harmony? I would like to hear your thoughts on Rainbow Falls, and here's to looking forward to the next key that will add on to the overarching storyline. I am DRWolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.
I was never hurt in the first place.